Chapter 28 of Dead Men's Shoes. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Lena Emsley. Dead Men's Shoes by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. Chapter 28. Marian is raised to distinction. Sir Wilford, clad in the latest fashion in checks, a rough and fleecy raiment which his father would have deemed better suited to clothe his gamekeeper or groom than himself, and mounted on Bull of Bashan, is a sight to behold this winter afternoon, as he trots gaily down the wide avenue at the How, and emerges therefrom on a bold and open country. The bull is a little fresh this afternoon, which, being interpreted, means that the grooms have been too lazy to take the superfluous energy out of that amiable animal for the last 2 days, whereby the bull behaves like a quadruped newly introduced to a strange country, where all sights and sounds, colours and shapes of objects, lights and shadows are new to him. He shies ferociously at every trunk in the long line of elms, and indulges in a serpentine movement for the length of the avenue. He takes objection to the colour of the gravel where the road has been mended, and on suddenly beholding the white gate, which he ought to know as well as his own manger, recoils on his haunches, and curls himself up into a ball, and in this shape canters furiously into the road, startling the lazy waggoner asleep on his wain, and rousing a flight of rooks from their afternoon repose by the clatter of his iron shoes. The cawing of the rooks finishes the bull altogether, and sends him off like a maniac or demoniacally possessed animal. But Sir Wilford, having now got him into the open country, is able to take it out of him over a fine stretch of moorland, and brings him back to the high road a couple of miles further off, a subdued and subjugated beast, willing to settle into a comfortable trot, which, with an occasional interval of walking, carries Sir Wilford into Redcastle by afternoon tea-time, that pleasant hour betwixt day and night, when labour rests, or should rest, from its cares, and the household music of the kettle singing on the hob speaks peace to the soul of the weary. Mr. Trenchard is taking afternoon tea with his 2 nieces, Sybil and Marian, in the firelit drawing-room at Lancaster Lodge, a room which, like most other rooms, looks its best by that uncertain light, now gorgeous in the glow of crimson and gold, anon wrapped in shadow. Marian has been invited to spend the day. The 2 girls have employed the short winter afternoon in a review of Sybil's last new dresses, an inspection which has not been conducive to the younger sister's peace of mind or good temper. At the announcement of Sir Wilford Cardinal, however, Marian brightens a little and is glad. "How lucky he should have called to-day," she thinks. "Sybil is too mean to ask me here on purpose to see him, and now he must be introduced to me, and I can talk about knowing him as well as Sybil. What will Maria Harrison say, I wonder, when I tell her that I'm quite intimate with Sir Wilford Cardinal?" Marian little knows the mighty honour which fate has reserved for her, little dreams that by the happy accident of her presence at Lancaster Lodge this afternoon she is to be raised to a giddy height of grandeur, from which she will hardly be able to glance downwards without vertigo. Sir Wilford is presented to Miss Marian Faunthorpe in due form by Mr. Trenchard, and the conversation becomes at once general and sprightly, glancing upon such original topics as the probability of a hard frost before long, the advantage of the present weather from a sporting point of view, the health and well-being of the baronet's stud, the superlative virtues and capabilities of his latest equine purchase, the probability of a day's good racing at Tilbury. "You ought to see the Tilbury steeplechase," says Sir Wilford. "Tilbury Common's only 3 miles from the How, you know. and it's an uncommonly good day's sport. Gentlemen jocks and that kind of thing. I've ridden there myself, but I didn't enter anything this year. You ought really, you know, Miss Faunthorpe. In point of fact, I came over here this afternoon on purpose to ask you and Mr. Trenchard to come and stay with us next week. My sister gave me a letter for you. She's dreadfully anxious for you to come, and I think the change of air would do Mr. Trenchard good. We stand a good bit higher than you do, you know, and get a sniff off the moors. Remarkably healthy, that kind of thing, I'm told. Do say yes now, Mr. Trenchard, he urges, handing Sybil the letter. I'm afraid my dear uncle's health won't permit him to leave home, answers Sybil. He has been quite an invalid lately, you know, Sir Wilford. All the more reason he should have a change of air. Brace him up, you know. Capital thing for invalids, moorland air. And if Miss Marianne... Marian, interjects that young lady. Not even by Sir Wilford Cardinal will she submit to be called Mary Ann. If Miss Miriam... Marian... I beg your pardon, I'm sure. If Miss Marian will come, I shall be delighted, and I'm sure my sister will be quite awfully glad. Marian blushes crimson with delight at such an invitation. You are too kind, she gasps. I positively dote upon races. I shouldn't have thought your passion for them had had time to reach such a height, says Sybil sneeringly, since you were never at a race in your life before last year's summer meeting. She is provoked at Marian's eagerness to accept an invitation, the acceptance of which can only bring embarrassment upon her, Sybil. That means you'll come, exclaims Sir Wilford, answering Marian. And of course, if you say yes, Miss Faunthorpe can't say no. Sisters always think alike, two cherries on one stalk, like Juno's swans, together and inseparable, you know. And now we only want Mr. Trenchard's acquiescence. I should be a churl to refuse so hospitable an invitation, and deprive these girls of so much pleasure, replies Stephen Trenchard. Bravo, cries Sir Wilford. Then it's all settled. You'll come next Saturday? I don't think I can be ready by Saturday, murmurs Marian, with an awful fear upon the subject of her wardrobe, which will need Herculean labours of cutting and contriving, and some expenditure of cash, before it can be fit for the halls of Cardinal. Pray, dear uncle, do not think of us, says Sybil. I don't at all care about races, and much as I appreciate Miss Cardinal's kind invitation, I really would rather not accept it, for fear the fatigue and the excitement should be too much for you. Nasty thing, thinks Marian. She refuses just because I'm invited. Artful puss, thinks Stephen. She keeps him on by holding him off. Don't be afraid about your uncle, Miss Faunthorpe, says Sir Wilford. We shall be awfully careful of him. I'm not quite so decrepit as my niece thinks me, says Mr. Trenchard, and I shall quite enjoy a few days at the How. That's glorious, cries Sir Wilford. On Saturday, then. You'll drive over in time for luncheon? Be sure to bring your habit, Miss Faunthorpe. I've a chestnut mare that will suit you to perfection. And I can mount you too, Miss Marian, if you like riding. I positively adore it, gushes Marian. Sybil and I used to take it in turns to ride Uncle Robert's pony when we were little things. I was so sorry when the pony grew too small for us. Sir Wilford, having settled this important question, and drunk 3 cups of tea, chiefly for the pleasure of having his cup and saucer handed him by Sybil, departs, leaving the elder sister heavy-hearted, the younger in a state of wild excitement, which her natural awe of Stephen Trenchard can hardly subdue. "What am I to do about my things, Sybil?" she whispers, as the 2 girls sit side by side on a sofa by the fire. "What things?" "My dresses, jackets, gloves, hats, boots, everything. I've hardly a rag that's fit to wear at the How." "Then you oughtn't to have accepted the invitation. You might have seen that you were only asked because you happened to be here, and Sir Wilford could not very well leave you out." "How unkind of you to say that!" It's preposterous to accept an invitation when you have no clothes fit to be worn at the house you're asked to visit. You ought to have refused." "Ought I? That's very nice and sisterly of you, I'm sure. Very much like twin cherries and Juno's fiddlesticks. Just the only chance I ever had of enjoying myself and seeing life. Going into society, in fact, and a chance that would give me quite a new position in Redcastle. Bring those horrid Stormonts and that disgusting Mrs. Groshen to their senses, and you expect me to refuse it. It's positively unnatural of you, Sybil." And Marion relieves her bursting heart with a gush of tears. "Why, what's the matter, girl?" cries Stephen Trenchard, starting from that placid slumber into which the fire-glow and subdued murmur of the girls' voices have beguiled him. "You don't come here to cry, I hope, Marion? If we make you unhappy, you'd better stay away." Mr. Trenchard is not the kind of man to allow his afternoon repose to be disturbed by a whimpering niece. His young kinsfolk must make themselves agreeable if they hope to retain his favour. "It's all Sybil's unkindness," says Marion, swallowing her sobs in an unpleasantly convulsive manner. "She hasn't a bit of heart. She never had. When Sir Wilfrid Cardinal has invited me and all, she throws my poverty in my face and says I must refuse the invitation on account of my things." "What does the girl mean by things?" "I simply reminded Marion that the invitation gives us very short notice, and that her wardrobe is hardly fit for visiting at the How." "Oh, is that all?" exclaims Mr. Trenchard. "That shan't stand in your way, Marion. You can get whatever you want for this visit at Carmichael's, and have it put down to Sybil's account." "Oh, uncle, you are too good, too generous," gasps Marion, forgetting how often she has inveighed against Mr. Trenchard's meanness. "Don't make a fuss, please, Marion," says Stephen, closing his eyes again. Sybil is gloomy. She would do much to prevent this visit, were there any way open to her by which it could be prevented. She feels that to visit at Sir Wilfrid's house is a kind of treason against her husband. True that the baronet is not yet her declared admirer, but his admiration is not the less obvious, and the town gossips have already been busy with her name and Sir Wilfrid's. How provoking Uncle Trenchard is, and Marion too. She hates them both, and preserves a sullen manner towards Marion all the evening, a sullenness which that young lady imputes to jealousy. Perhaps she thinks that Sir Wilfrid might be fickle enough to admire me a little, muses Marion, elated beyond measure by the prospect of her visit and the idea of getting things at Carmichael's. Of course Sybil is the beauty, we all know that, but I flatter myself I have a little more animation than she has, and in the long run fascinating manners are more admired than good looks. Fortified thus in her self-esteem, Marion departs in the highest spirits, after having made Sybil promise to go shopping with her next morning. Sybil makes her preparations for the visit with a heavy heart. She assists Marion kindly enough, now that she has resigned herself to the inevitable. She lends her sister the aid of her counsel, and considerably chastens Marion's taste in colours and patterns, a taste which inclines to the loud and fast, large checks, big metal buttons, yachting jackets, and small pork-pie hats. Sybil takes care that her sister shall be dressed like a lady, which may be done cheaply, and not like a fashion plate, the latter involving lavish expenditure, and often resulting in disappointment. Sybil selects hues which harmonize with Marion's hair and complexion, and not the last new colour which the shopman presses upon her, as if novelty and beauty were convertible terms. "I'm afraid you'll make me an awful dowdy," remonstrates Marion, who is inclined to object to the combination of rich brown and soft cream colour which Sybil recommends for a walking costume. "And this languid shade of blue relieved by rushings, pipings, and flouncings of palest salmon, which Sibyl declares will make a lovely dinner dress. "See what Miss Eylett will say to my choice," says Sibyl. "Oh, of course that old Eylett will side with you. She knows how to flatter a good customer." "Choose for yourself then, Marion, and be happy." "Well, upon my word, I don't know what to have," says Marion, surveying the counter, and biting the tip of her gloved forefinger to assist cogitation. "There's that lovely peach, I should like of all things, and that heavenly maize. Think of it, trimmed with black lace. Charming for a brunette, but odious for a blonde. And to trim it properly you would want at least £50 worth of lace. That apple green brocade, then, with the lovely rosebuds. Admirable for a dowager, but quite unsuited to you. I wonder if Uncle Trenchard would mind my having a ruby velvet. I've always fancied a ruby velvet." "With a diamond tiara, of course. Most appropriate for a country surgeon's niece, especially when he's the parish doctor." "Well, I suppose you'd better choose. I'll have the blue and salmon, but it's horrid thin silk." "Quite good enough for an evening dress, which will be done for when its freshness is gone." So Marion finally accepts Sibyl's superior judgment. Her purchases include a pretty grey merino for mornings and walking, a rich brown silk, the pale blue dinner dress, and handsome black cloth jacket, garments which are judiciously bought for something less than £30. With these materials the two girls drive straight to Miss Eylett, who, with much persuasion from Sibyl, is induced to promise the 3 dresses for Saturday morning. "And now all you have to do is to get Hester to wash and iron your white muslins," says Sibyl, "so that you may have some simple dresses for the quiet evenings. I'll lend you a sash or 2. "Upon my word, Sib, you're quite a darling. What made you so disagreeable last night?" "I do not want to go to the How, and I was vexed with you and Uncle Trenchard for snapping at the invitation." "Don't want to go to the How?" cries Marion, with as much astonishment as if Sibyl had said she didn't wish to go to heaven. "Don't want to go to the How, when it's the grandest chance you ever had in your life, and people are beginning to say that you can be Lady Cardinal if you like." "People are idiots and busybodies. I don't want to be Lady Cardinal or Lady anybody else." "Sibyl, don't be so affected," exclaims Marion, disgusted by a repudiation which she believes thoroughly insincere. Mr. Trenchard's carriage deposits Marion at the shabby old house beyond the minster, and Jenny comes rushing out into the wintry air, last year's tartan frock a good deal too short for those obtrusive legs of hers, to kiss Sibyl, to the disgust of the coachman, who looks upon this branch of his employer's family as a low lot. "That's the worst of living with these here novel riches," he complains to John the footman. "They may climb the ladder of fortune themselves, but they leave their relations a grovelling at the bottom." "What do you mean by novel riches?" inquires the simple John. "Well, parvenus, stupid, if you must have the vernacular." Hester and Jenny Faunthorpe have a rather hard time of it for the rest of this important week. Hester at the wash-tub and the ironing-board, Jane engaged in darning socks and sewing on tapes and buttons, her sister's wardrobe requiring more small repairs than are consistent with a notion of order and industry in its owner. "Well, you have let your things go to seed, Marion," remarks Jane. "If it hadn't been for this visit of yours, I should think you must have dropped to pieces altogether before long." "You're an impertinent chit," exclaims Marion, frowning over a complicated darn. "Well, you might be civil when I'm toiling like a slave for you." "You may help me or leave it alone, just as you please. It's no pleasure to be under an obligation to you. As far as inclination goes, I'd much rather leave it alone. replies the argumentative Jane. "But for the credit of the family I shall do my best to prevent you going into society with your heels coming through your stockings. But I can't help saying that I think you'd find it better for the health of your stockings to darn them before they come to this." And Jenny emphasizes her remark by thrusting her hand through a yawning chasm in the stocking she is operating upon. "Keep your opinions to yourself, and don't make the holes bigger by sticking your enormous hand through them," says Marion. "This is a grateful world," murmurs Jane resignedly. Dr. Faunthorpe is pleased at the idea of his younger niece's pleasure, though the visit to the How will drag a pound or two out of his scantily furnished purse, pounds already engaged for tax or water rate, as the case may be, and the subtraction of which will throw his financial arrangements out of gear for ever so long. But Robert Faunthorpe is one of those good little men whose mission upon this earth seems to be to suffer and be patient, if not to suffer and be strong. Nay, is there not exceeding strength in this quiet patience, this placid endurance of loss and deprivation, this uncomplaining surrender of all that the selfish live for? Humboldt wisely says that if every man is said to have his own destiny in his hands, that saying must be read to mean, not that he has the power to alter fate, but rather the power to make the best of bad fortune, and by his gentle acceptance of ill, to transmute evil into good. Deprivations, small acts of self-abnegation, which would have hurt another man, gave Dr. Faunthorpe a pleasant feeling, a genial sense of warmth and comfort in the region of the heart, which had the effect of whisky toddy or any other comfortable stimulant. End of chapter 28.
Chapter 29 of Dead Men's Shoes. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Judy Mason. Dead Men's Shoes by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. Chapter 29. At the How. Saturday shows bright and fair, a fine winter day, hoar-frost on the hedges. The roads are dry, but not too hard for the horses. The minster towers stand out, sharply defined against the clear cold blue. Rooks are screaming loud in the ragged elm boughs, robins singing merrily. A blithe day in the newborn year, a day which inspires Redcastle with the idea that trade is brisker than it has been, and things in general looking up, so potent is the influence of the fine weather. Never has Marion Faunthorpe felt so proud or happy as when her uncle's carriage calls for her and her boxes, and she takes her seat opposite Mr. Trenchard, who, by right divine of his 70 occupies the post of honour, wrapped to the chin in sable, and with a tiger rug over his knees. "Did you shoot that tiger yourself, dear uncle?" asks Marion, bent on making herself agreeable. "No, child," replies the dear uncle rather snappishly. "I had something better to do in India than to shoot tigers." "But it's very nice shooting big game, isn't it, uncle? Some people go to India on purpose for that, don't they?" "Fools do, perhaps. There's no accounting for their taste." The little surgeon has come out to the gate to see his niece off. Nay, he has actually stolen an hour from the parish in order to behold the glory of her departure. He seems as pleased to see her happiness as if he himself were going to the How, and at the last moment the girl feels touched. "You dear darling old uncle," she says, hanging round his neck, and forgetting the possibility of damage to her new hat. "How good you always are! Always, 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 and I'm an ungrateful wretch." "My love, you are not ungrateful, and you have very little to be grateful for. Everything you mean, Uncle Robert. I shall think of you ever so many times a day at the How, and if the dinners are very nice, I shall so wish you could be with us." "Thank you, my dear. I shall think of you, and miss you very much." "I'm going to keep house," exclaims Jenny, lolling against the gate and swaying to and fro distractingly as she talks, "and make tea and all. Nobody to tell me not to take too much butter. And Hester will give us my favourite puddings, I know, if I quill her cap borders." So, after embracing the doctor in this demonstrative fashion, Marion enters the carriage with tears in her eyes, to the aggravation of Stephen Trenchard, who hates tears and fuss and emotion of all kinds, except the thrill of delight which accompanies a successful stroke of business. "Crying again?" he exclaims testily. "What's the matter now?" "There's nothing the matter, dear uncle, only I'm so happy, and I feel a little overcome at leaving Uncle Robert." "It's a pity you should leave him at all if the parting is so pathetic," sneers Mr. Trenchard. "Oh, Sibyl, I've had such a nice little note from Miss Cardonnel to confirm Sir Wilford's invitation," says Marion, and she exhibits a formal note in which the polite Phoebe expresses her satisfaction at having heard from her brother that Miss Marion Faunthorpe has promised to accompany her sister on Saturday. The drive is delightful for any one with an unburdened mind, and even Sibyl feels the sweetness of the clear winter air, and determines to make the best of an awkward concatenation of events. After all, it is better to be lolling in Uncle Trenchard's carriage on one's way to a delightful old country house, than to be grinding at French or German verbs in Mrs. Hazleton's cheerless second-floor schoolroom, badly warmed by a fire that seems always made of the dullest coals that ever came from the bosom of the earth. And all this is but the filling of a gap in her life. This chasm of time bridged over, and she will be with Alexis once more, and they will have Uncle Trenchard's money to spend, and be happy ever afterwards. She has persuaded herself that, let Alexis make what protestations he pleases in the present, he will take her to his heart again gladly when the fitting time comes. "And in the meantime there's no use in my moping and making myself miserable," reflects Sibyl, her spirits elevated by atmospheric influences, and the prospect of being the object of general admiration. "I wonder if there will be many people there," she speculates presently. "People with titles," suggests Marion. "A duke, perhaps. I should like to see a duke, or a duchess. That would be better still. Think of her dresses, Sib. Mustn't they be magnificent?" Sibyl smiles the languid smile of contempt at her sister's simplicity. "As if there were a sliding scale for the toilette," she says. "Why, cotton spinners' wives dress as well as duchesses nowadays. They employ the same milliners and pay their bills quicker." "It's dreadful to think of," replies Marion. "It seems like turning things topsy-turvy, you know." They are at the How by this time, a domain which Marion enters open-eyed and dumb with awe. Sir Wilford comes out into the porch to receive them, and gives directions about their luggage, and makes himself generally busy. Then he calls out Phoebe and introduces Marion to her, at which Marion, being almost tongue-tied by shyness, says, "Thank you." "You show the Miss Faunthorpes their rooms, Phoebe," says the hospitable baronet, "but this is a length to which Miss Cardonnel will not go, though she conducted her dearest Cecilia to her apartment half an hour ago with her arm round Cecilia's severely trained waist." "Perker knows all about the rooms," she says, whereupon appears the essence of respectability, in a black silk gown and smart cap, otherwise Mrs. Perker, the housekeeper. Sibyl and Marion follow this personage up the broad oak staircase to a long perspective of corridor in which Mrs. Perker opens two doors next to each other, and reveals twin bed chambers neatly furnished with maple and chintz. " I thought you two ladies would like to be next to each other," remarks the housekeeper obligingly, as if the choice of rooms were entirely her own. " We do very much," exclaims Marion, who regains her power of speech in this inferior presence. " I'm very glad I'm to be near Sibyl. I should be awfully afraid of ghosts in this great rambling house." Mrs. Perker smiles condescendingly, as if she were a superior order of being accustomed to large houses and family spectres. " It is a rambling old place," she says, " but I shouldn't fancy myself in one of your fine, lightsome, modern houses, all glare and gilding." " And there is a ghost, I dare say," says Marion, with thrilling interest. The housekeeper screws up her lips and smiles significantly, as if she could, and if she would, tell of as many apparitions as appear in the tragedy of Macbeth. " There has never been a ghost owned to at the How," she says, " and I wouldn't breathe the name of such a thing in Miss Cardonnel's hearing, but people have been frightened. Strangers. It may have been rats, or it may have been the wind. I can't say. But there are friends of the family who wouldn't sleep in this corridor, no, not for £1,000. Marion shudders and almost wishes herself back in the shabby old house at the end of Redcastle. " So here are your rooms, young ladies, opening into each other." " How nice !" exclaims Marion. Never in her life has she felt more warmly attached to Sibyl than she does at this moment. Fires burn cheerily in both rooms, and each apartment has that thoroughly comfortable and convenient air only to be seen in a well-ordered country house, and altogether distinct from the cheerless precision of an hotel bedchamber. There is the nice little writing table, with all things needful for correspondence, in front of the fire, the Casey chair, the candles and pincushion, and a hothouse flower or two in a slender vase on the dressing table. All smiles a welcome to the stranger. Not Miss Cardonnel's welcome, by the way, but Mrs. Perker's. " I've given your maid a nice room on the second floor, within easy reach of this, ma'am," says the housekeeper, at which Marion's eyes open wide with wonder. " I have no maid," replies Sibyl, unabashed by that humiliating fact. " I am accustomed to wait upon myself." " Indeed, ma'am. Some young ladies prefer it, I know. For my own part, I couldn't bear anybody fidgeting about me, and if you should require any assistance, Miss Cardonnel's maid will be very happy." " Thanks, no, my sister can help me if I want her." And Sibyl proceeds to open her handsome portmanteaus, while Marion contrives to stand before the shabby receptacle which contains her property, lest the scrutinizing eye of Mrs. Perker should behold its dilapidation. The housekeeper bustles off and leaves the two girls to themselves. " It's rather like going to school again, isn't it, Sibyl ?" inquires Marion, whose spirits have sunk a little, oppressed by the unfamiliar splendours of the How. " I feel just as I did the day we went to Miss Worry's, and I can't help fancying we shall be told off into our different classes when we go downstairs." The sound of the luncheon bell reminds the sisters that they have no time to waste, and they go downstairs together presently, conscious that they are looking nice enough to face even unfriendly criticism. Sir Wilford is lounging in the hall, and they go into luncheon under his wing. Fred Stormont is near the dining room door, and rushes to meet Sibyl and her sister, and Mrs. Stormont gives a friendly bow from the other end of the table, where she sits among the stately matrons and the bald-headed fathers of the land, and they begin to feel themselves more at home as Marion whispers to her sister. The conversation at luncheon runs more continuously upon the present company's absent brothers and sisters, and cousins, and nieces, and sons and daughters-in-law, than is quite congenial to the feelings of a stranger totally unacquainted with these relations. But Marion manages to get up a little talk about nothing particular with Fred Stormont, which, beheld from afar, looks like flirtation, and causes the young man's anxious mother to put up her gold eyeglass and look at him through it, wondering how that silly Frederick can be so ridiculous as to waste his attentions upon the wrong sister. "I suppose Mr. Trenchard will leave the girl £5,000 or so," thinks Mrs. Stormont, "but what would be the use of that to a young man with Fred's expensive habits?" End of chapter 29. Chapter 30 of Dead Men's Shoes. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Judy Mason. Dead Men's Shoes by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. Chapter 30. Tilbury Steeplechase. The guests assembled at the How soon divide themselves into sections or groups, like the various members of the lower animal creation. Mr. and Mrs. Chasuble draw around them the more seriously minded of the younger visitors, Lavinia Cardonnel, Cecilia Hawtrey, who has a poetical mind, and is Anglican to the verge of Romanism, Laura and Mary Radnor, who are great upon church decoration and choir singing, and some others. General Mactower attracts the young men, as it were, into a focus of sporting talk, varied with anecdotes of the London world, which, according to the General, is about as vile a world as could well exist without calling down a burning fiery rain for its destruction. Sir Wilford contrives to be attentive to all his guests, but shows himself so particular in his devotion to Sibyl that other people cannot afford to be uncivil to her, even were they disposed to snub so lovely a girl. The matrons and their daughters admit the fact of Miss Faunthorpe's beauty, but with certain reservations. They admire her complexion, but opine that its transparent purity of tint argues a consumptive tendency. And what a dreadful thing for poor Sir Wilford to marry a consumptive wife, my dear, says Mrs. Radnor in an awful voice. And to have consumptive children, adds her daughter Laura. Poor little dears, exclaims Miss Hawtrey, compassionating the sorrows of these unborn infants in advance. I think it quite wicked of consumptive people to marry. Don't you, Mrs. Radnor? Yes, my love, there ought to be a law against it. What pretty manners Miss Faunthorpe has, remarks Mrs. Vernon, whose daughter possesses every attraction except good looks and agreeable manners. So sweet, so caressing, but don't you think, I hardly like to say it, for it sounds so uncharitable, and I should be the last to say anything uncharitable after dear Mr. Chasuble's moving discourse this morning. Don't you think she seems rather artful? As deep as Garrick, says the outspoken Mrs. Radnor. She actually seems to discourage Sir Wilford's attentions, quite pretends to avoid him, makes believe to prefer ladies' society, when we all know that she must be delighted at the idea of making such a brilliant match. When we know that the girl is brought here on purpose to marry him, rejoins Mrs. Radnor, the old uncle has set his heart upon it, of course, and will leave her the whole of his property to the detriment of her two sisters. There's another girl at Redcastle, Mrs. Stormont tells me. Very unjust, I call it. This conversation takes place on Sunday afternoon, in a cosy circle round the morning room fire, while Sibyl and some of the younger guests are walking in the park. Sunday evening affords an opportunity for the display of musical genius, or talent, as the case may be, and after the daughters of the land have done the most they can with Miss Lindsay's sacred ballads, Beethoven, Mozart, Mendelssohn, and Chopin, Sibyl takes her turn at the instrument, and surpasses all her forerunners, not so much by the brilliancy of her singing or playing, as by the thought and feeling which pervade both. In the long empty days at Lancaster Lodge, her piano has been her friend and companion. the confidant of all her vague regrets and fears, her sorrowful love for her absent husband. Memory and hope have spoken to her in many a tender strain of Mozart's, in the deeper pathos of Beethoven, or Mendelssohn's dreamy melody. Sir Wilford Cardonnel knows very little about music, save that of his hounds giving tongue in the chill morning air that blows over heath and moor, but he is not the less pleased that Sibyl should excel in the musical line. His future wife ought to be an accomplished person. He is glad, too, that she should take the shine out of Phoebe and Vinnie, neither of them highly gifted by Apollo, though both have laboured hard, and flourished at a quickish pace through unmelodious fantasias, arpeggioing up and down the piano with a movement which their brother calls a rough gallop. Altogether, Sibyl is a success at the How. No one can dispute that. Marion looks on and wonders at her sister's calm acceptance of the general homage. She wears her honours as to the manner born, while Marion feels overpowered with shyness all through that aristocratic Sabbath, and says thank you for everything, from an introduction or a compliment to the too hasty removal of her plate by an all-accomplished serving-man. By Monday morning, however, even Marion is quite at her ease, save for an inward awe of Phoebe and Lavinia, who, behind their brother's back, give her a little of the de haut en bas manner, by which intrusive commoners are crushed. But Fred Stormont takes her under his protection, and finding Sibyl unapproachable amidst her various admirers, consoles himself with a mild flirtation with Marion, to which even his watchful parent reconciles herself, reflecting that, after all, a dower of £5,000, or possibly 10, is better than nothing, and that, no heiress being forthcoming, dear Frederick might make Marion happy by proposing to her. After breakfast on Monday there is a general inspection of the stables, at which even Mr. Chasubel, the High Church parson, assists, and in the course of which he entertains the company with anecdotes of his hard riding days at Oxford, and his prowess in the hunting field. The horses are led out for admiration, and the guests commit themselves to various opinions at which the nether lips of the Yorkshire grooms work convulsively in the respectful endeavour to avoid a grin. Tuesday is race day, and there is a consultation as to how people are to go. The faster of the party, including all the young ladies, inclining to the saddle, the middle-aged and portly being satisfied with a seat on the drag, or in Miss Cardonnel's barouche. " You will ride, of course," says Sir Wilford to Frederick. " Oh, by all means. I shall go on the Dutchman. Here he is, poor old fellow, looking as fresh as paint." An officious boy has just led the bony grey into the quadrangle, where every eye is now directed to him. " Why, where the deuce did you get that beast from, Cardonnel ?" cries General Mactower, as the lad whisks off the Dutchman's checked raiment, and exhibits his angular haunches and dejected neck. " Never saw such a screw in your stable." " It is Mr. Stormont's horse," says the boy, grinning. " Beg your pardon, Stormont," says the General. " I dare say he looks better in action. Very good for leather, no doubt." " He may not be much to look at," says Fred, wounded yet apologetic, " but he's a devil to go." " Ah, I dare say those bony ones are sometimes." " Well, Stormont, you'll ride the Dutchman," resumes Sir Wilford. " That's capital. You can take care of Miss Marion Faunthorpe." " Delighted, I'm sure," gasps Fred, with an inward sinking. He knows too well that on the Dutchman he has enough to do to take care of himself, and that a whole hunting field might be spilt around him without his being able to afford to help the fallen. " You haven't ridden much lately, I think you told me, Miss Marion," says Sir Wilford to that young lady, who has been going into raptures about all the horses with long mane and sleek skins. " Not since I was quite a little thing, but I idolize riding." " And you'll not be afraid to ride Tilberry to morrow. It's a nice quiet road." I shall like it of all things." "Very well, Chanter, you must find me a safe mount for this young lady. She hasn't been riding much lately." "One of the old ones, Sir Wilford?" "Yes, old and steady, but something good to look at, you know." "Oh, there's brown Fixture, Sir Wilford, an uncommon good hoss, and safe as a church." "Yes, Fixture'll do, nothing like an old steeplechaser." "Fixture's as steady as a Christian," says the groom, "and such a memory too. Nobody'd think of 'ow that horse do remember. He ain't forgot the day he bolted with Jem Kirk, though it's nigh 7 year ago. He never do pass that corner of the 'eath but what he'll prick up his old ears and stick 'em back'ards, and give a bit of a quiver as if he'd like to have another lark." "He mustn't have any larks with Miss Faunthorpe," says Sir Wilford. "Lord bless you, no, Sir Wilford, that's 7 year ago. Fixture's as steady as a house. The smallest of our boys rides him beautiful." "Well, Miss Marion, I think you'll be safe on Fixture, especially with Stormont to take care of you." Marion looks gratefully at Frederick, with a vague idea that he is going to escort her with a leading rein, and that under his care she would be safe upon the winner of the Ledger. "And now let's have a look at Juno," says Wilford. "That's the mare I mean for you, Miss Faunthorpe, and I think every one will allow she's a perfect beauty. My sister Phoebe wants her badly, but I'm afraid of Phoebe's 11 stone." That substantially built damsel gives her brother an indignant look at this brutal remark, which could only come from one's own flesh and blood. "When I want a horse I shan't ask you to choose him for me, Wilford," she says. Juno is led forth and unveiled, a chestnut, glossy as the nut itself when it bursts from its green casing, and beautiful in form, with a small head and a Greek profile, ox-eyed like her mighty namesake. "How lovely!" exclaim all the young ladies, envying Sibyl. This selection of the best horse in the stud for Miss Faunthorpe is tantamount to a proposal, thinks every one, and from this time forward Sibyl is regarded as the future Lady Cardonnel, and honoured accordingly. Has he or has he not proposed? The council of matrons ask one another by and by, in the comfortable morning room where they have assembled to write their letters and read the newspapers. The majority opine that the offer has been made and accepted, and that Mr. Trenchard is here to arrange about settlements. "Phoebe Cardonnel must know," hazards Mrs. Chasubel, this conversation taking place in the absence of the Miss Cardonnels, who are playing billiards with their younger guests. "She may, but she's such a reserved girl, there's no getting anything out of her. And as it's evident that she and Lavinia hate the idea of their brother's marrying, it's a subject we can't approach very well." "I feel sure he has proposed," says Mrs. Radnor. "He looks as if it was a settled thing." "He may have settled it all in his own mind, but not yet declared himself," responds Mrs. Chasubel. "He must know that there is no chance of rejection." Mrs. Chasubel is right. Sir Wilford is fixed as fate, but has not yet found an opportunity to ask the fatal question. Sibyl is always in a crowd. She contrives to avoid anything approaching a tete-a-tete, and a man can hardly propose during a game of pyramids, or on a crowded drag with a spirited team in his hand, or as he hands his beloved a cup of tea at kettledrum time, or on the stairs, or in church. Sir Wilford bides his time, therefore, and is patient. The important Tuesday is a fine clear day with a high wind but no frost. Tilbury races begin at 1:30, so there is no time for luncheon at the How, and a necessity for picnic baskets on the drag, very much to the delight of all the younger guests, who prefer to take their refreshment uncomfortably out of doors to the commonplace convenience of the dining room. At 1:15 the horses and carriages are brought round to the porch, and Marion, in a borrowed habit and chimney pot hat, which is balanced rather hazardly on a small mountain of padded hair, awaits, with some faint apprehension. her first ride on anything larger than Tommy, the old pony. She's not yet seen brown Fixture, and as she stands on the top step with Fred Stormont at her side, she surveys the animals timorously. There is Juno, satin-skinned and proud of bearing, arching her graceful neck and gazing pensively at the company with her ox eyes, pawing the ground a little with one delicate hoof, as if eager to take flight. And here is Sibyl, looking her prettiest, a small, slender prettiness, in neatly fitting riding habit and hat poised at exactly the right angle. Sir Wilford is at hand to mount her, and there is the usual careful adjustment of stirrup and skirt, curb and snaffle. " I wonder which is my horse," says Marion, with an appealing look at Mr. Stormont. " Which is Fixture, boy ?" asks Fred of an attendant lad. " This here, sir," answers the youth. This here is the animal in his charge, a tall brute with a neck a yard long, and, in the language of the stable, too much daylight underneath. " Good gracious !" cries Marion, appalled at the aspect of this animal. " Am I to go up there ?"" He's a big one, isn't he ?" responds Fred. " Capital stride, I should think. Get over plenty of ground in his gallop. Looks like an old steeplechaser, doesn't he ?"" He looks very dreadful," says Marion, dubiously. " Oh, you needn't be afraid of him. He's steady enough, depend upon it. Sir Wilford's head man wouldn't put you on an unsafe horse." " I hope not," says Marion. " But you'll take care of me, won't you, Mr. Stormont ?"" I'll do my best," answers Fred. " Here's the Dutchman, rather fresh, I'm afraid." This last remark has reference to an uncouth attempt of the Dutchman to back into an adjacent shrubbery, on being dragged out of which he entangles himself clumsily with the other horses. The drag and barouche have driven off by this time, and everybody is mounted except Marion and her swain. Mounting Marion upon Fixture is not the easiest operation in mechanics. She gives a tremendous spring, but always at the wrong moment, and after 2 or 3 false starts she is hoisted to a level with Fixture's saddle, only to remain there suspended in mid air until allowed to slide gently to earth again. " I'm afraid I'm not a good hand at mounting a lady," murmurs the patient Frederick, after he has made himself almost apoplectic in the endeavour. And now an experienced groom comes forward, tells Marion exactly at what angle to put her left leg, and throws her up into the saddle as if she were a ball. " Gracious !" she exclaims, " I'm here at last, but oh, how high it is !" She surveys the earth beneath her with a sense of awe. It is like being on a mountain top, and not half so safe. She gives a little cry of surprise when Fixture begins to move, as if motion were the last thing one might expect from a horse. The rest of the riders have gone down the avenue, Sir Wilford riding Bull of Bashan, keeping close by Sibyl on Juno. Frederick now clambers upon the Dutchman, who to the last moment struggles to elude his half proprietor, as if desirous to prove that a horse cannot serve 2 masters. Fixture caracoles gently upon the gravel sweep while Fred is mounting, but even these gentle movements strike terror to the unaccustomed soul of Marion. " I'm afraid he's very spirited," she remarks to one of the grooms. " Lord, mum, he's nigh 12-year-old. There's none too much spirit in him. You'd best ride him on the curb if you're any ways timid." " Which is the curb ?" inquires Marion. The man shows her and adjusts her reins, which she has been clutching in her right hand in an inextricable tangle. " But do you think I can manage him with the reins in my left hand ?" she asks. " It seems so left-handed. I'm afraid I shan't have any power over him." " You can hold on with both hands if you're timorsome, miss, but the lighter you handle Fixture the better. He's got a very nice mouth, and he don't stand being sawed at. Ride him on the curb if you like, but let your 'and foller his 'ead." This language is as dark as Hebrew to Marion. She has but one thought, and that is that she would fain be at rest in the barouche or the drag, nay, safe at home in the obscurity of domestic life, with cross Hester and impertinent Jane. Anywhere, off the back of brown Fixture, who has just caught sight of some obnoxious object and has made himself into an arch from which Marion feels as if she were sliding. Fred has now brought the Dutchman so far into subjection as to turn his nose toward the avenue, and Fixture being clutched and jerked in the same direction by Marion, the two set out as uncomfortable a couple as ever enjoyed the delights of equestrian exercise. When they are well out of earshot, the grooms and boys burst into a simultaneous guffaw. "After this we must have some beer," says the head man. "I'm blessed if ever I see such a brace of cockneys. I ain't had such a laugh since Christmas." Fixture proves himself worthy of his reputation, and goes down the avenue with an amiable sobriety, nay, would be perfect in his conduct were it not for that brute the Dutchman, who shies at the sight of a rabbit, wheels around altogether at sight of a rook, and otherwise disgraces himself by convulsive movements and collapses which disturb Fixture's equanimity, though he evidently regards them with contempt. The brown horse behaves so well, however, that when they've walked down the avenue and emerged upon the road, Marion begins to feel quite easy in her mind, and to think that after all she really does dote upon riding. But for the Dutchman's evil example, Fixture would behave admirably all the way to Tilbury, a nice level road, with little to alarm a reasonable equine mind. The Dutchman is, however, a creature without reasonableness of mind, and contrives to see objects of horror in the clearest road, whereby Marion is every now and then startled from her equanimity by a sudden bouncing of Mr. Stormont's horse against hers, a movement by which she narrowly escaped being pushed into a ditch. "Isn't your horse a little wrong in his mind, Mr. Stormont?" she asks after one of these encounters. "He puts his ears back in such a dreadful way, and starts and plunges so awfully." "Only high spirit," replies Fred. "All thoroughbreds do it." "Well, then, I think I'd rather ride an unthoroughbred," says Marion. When they have walked for about half a mile, Frederick suggests a gentle trot, to which proposal Marion acquiesces smilingly. But the very beginning of the gentle trot makes her breathless, and she finds herself jerked about in her saddle in a most ferocious way. She holds on to the reins, however, with both hands, and endures stoutly till Fred, in charity, reins in the Dutchman, whereupon Fixture stops as if some spring had been touched in his eternal economy, and nearly pitches Marion out of the saddle by the suddenness of his stoppage. "I'm afraid you don't quite enjoy trotting," says Fred. Marion pants for a little while, struggling with the innumerable hairpins which sustain her pyramid of plaits, before she can recover breath enough to answer. "I dare say it's very nice," she replies at last, "but it jerks one, don't you think? Perhaps Fixture is not a good trotter?" "I think if you were to rise with him, and sit a little more in the middle of your saddle, you might find it more comfortable," suggests Frederick. "Do you think so? I'll try next time." Fred endeavours to explain the theory of trotting, which, although he has not quite conquered the practice, is firmly impressed upon his mind. "Now," he says, flattering himself that he has made it all clear, "suppose we try again?" A shake of the reins makes the Dutchman lunge violently forward, as if he wanted to dash his brains out upon the road, and starts Fixture in a really delightful trot, if poor Marion only knew it. She bobs up and down as if she were bathing, but when she rises the horse doesn't, and the effect is even more jerky than before. She is just beginning to despair when the red glow of a cottage fire, shining through an open door, appalls the Dutchman's soul, and sends him into a wild canter, in which Fixture immediately joins. The horses tear along the road like a herd of swine driven